Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started. I hope you had a great chance to have some lunch and networking together. Anybody that's still back there, please come forward. There's lots of chairs, and if these are full, then bring some more chairs. We're trying to make this a very interactive session, so the more of you that are sitting up here, the better. And now we don't have our plates of food we're trying to balance on our laps, so look forward to having you join us up here. My name is Chris Enns. Welcome to the session of the Dialogue with Global Affairs Canada on the Grants and Contributions Transformation Initiative. Very happy to be part of this. I'm a Senior Manager of Global Health at the University of Calgary. I'm also a board member for CAIDP and was privileged to be part of the coordinating committee for this conference, so I'm very happy all the work we've been putting in over the last few months to get all this together, to see that all come together. And one of the big parts of this has been planning this session with Global Affairs to have a dialogue with them. So I'm very happy that all of you are still around and able to be part of it. I've been working in the field of international development for about 20 years as a development project evaluator, project manager. I started as an intern under the CEDA's International Youth Internship Program. So I've had many years' experience working with Global Affairs or having projects funded by Global Affairs. And this is my fourth CAIDP conference over the years I've been to. And besides the opportunity to and the value of interacting with people in our field and learning from each other, one of the things that I always found most valuable of these conferences was the chance to interact with Global Affairs and senior representatives coming and talking about what is happening in Global Affairs, what some of the future priorities and trends were, and also how that knowledge could help us in our work, whether we're bidding on projects, whether we're working on projects, evaluating projects. Getting that feedback is so helpful, and so that's what I'm excited about with this session. And especially talking about this Grants and Contributions Transformation Initiative, because it's a huge undertaking that Global Affairs is undergoing, and they are very keen on getting feedback. And I was in a few calls with Global Affairs in the last few months and said, we want to get input. And we're like, okay, we will take you up on that and find a way to do this. And so I'm very happy to have this panel with us today to talk about that. So just as a bit of the background, Global Affairs Canada launched the Grants and Contributions Transformation Initiative to streamline and modernize the department's grants and contribution system for international assistance. So the goal of the initiative is to make the system more efficient, more effective, more transparent, more responsive, and more accountable, which is a big ask, to serve the needs of communities that Canada funds and the organizations that Canada works with. So the focus is going to be on minimizing the administrative burden, making it easier to apply for assistance, improving risk assessments, and making information more current and easier to share. I think we'd all agree that would be great for our work, and we want to help be part of that. So I'll let Brandon give more of an overview of that, but just getting a bit of a taste of what the initiative is about. So let me introduce our panelists so you can know who we're going to be talking with today. So on my far left is Brandon Lee. He's the Director General of the Grants and Contributions Transformation at Global Affairs Canada. In his role, he's helping to lead a comprehensive reform of how Global Affairs Canada manages all of its approximately $6 billion of grants and contributions globally. That's a good thing to be able to say at a party, like, what have you made? So we're very honored that you can be here. Brandon has a strong background both as an executive and leading innovation with national and international governments. He has served as the Consul General of Canada to the Pacific Northwest and Alaska, Northern California, and Hawaii. He has been a senior change management advisor at the International Committee of the Red Cross and was Director of Innovation at DFATE back in 2009 to 2011. So you were involved in it before, went out, did other things, and then came back in. So it's great to have you here. Next to him is Anne Germain. Anne is the Director of the Business Process Transformation. Prior to joining the Grants and Contributions Transformation team, and led Global Affairs Canada's innovation in the international assistance team. Over the course of her career, she has held several roles in policy, strategic operations, and international development programs, including abroad in Bolivia and the Philippines. And then next to me is David LeBlanc, Deputy Director of Strategic Engagement and Communications. So David LeBlanc is the Deputy Director for Strategic Engagement Communications for the Grants and Contributions Transformation Initiative. Prior to his time with the department, David has held similar roles in the federal public service, including leading Elections Canada's Inspire Democracy initiative, which aims to reduce barriers to participating in Canadian federal elections. Before joining the public service, David worked in the NGO sector, notably having helped start an NGO in rural Thailand that works with displaced Burmese farmers. Can you join me in welcoming our panelists today? So, the intention today is to hear a bit from the team about the initiative, what is happening in global affairs, what is going to be happening, and then having a chance for interaction to give input to the team about what we would like to see in that transformation, but also finding out information from them that will guide and support our work right now. And Brandon, when he and I just met before, he was asking, I hope there's going to be some questions. And we said, don't worry, this is a group that is dying to ask some questions and give feedback. So I hope we can meet his challenge and his request. He's very keen to engage with us and learn from us and share with us. So I hope this afternoon we'll have some good discussion. So the way we've structured it, we'll start off, Brandon's going to give a brief overview presentation about the initiative. And then Anne-Germain's going to do a deeper dive into that. And then we're going to shift into the interactive part. And now many of you, we sent out an email before asking for your questions, so we've gathered some of those and shared them with them ahead of time. And there's also going to be a chance for you to ask questions of them here. So we're going to have a combination of ways that you can ask questions, and Brandon will explain this a bit more. But we're going to use Mentimeter online so people can put in their questions, and then you can see what other people have asked. And if you're like, that's a very good question, you upvote it. And then David can see that. We'll be monitoring that, and then that will help make sure your most pressing questions get their attention. But then we'll also have a roaming mic so you can give a bit more context to a question and ask it directly. And so we want to have a very good interactive session. So I'll stop talking now and hand it over to Brandon and let him jump into things.
Thank you very much, Chris. Okay, thank you, Chris. It's a real pleasure to be here. And as Chris said, we are here to hear from you. Of course, to give an update, but one of the key things as I go through is we need to design the future way global affairs manages grants and contributions so it works for everybody, including all of you. So, Naswaya Patim, I should just speak in English, and those of you so please don't be shy. I won't go further into myself. I'm Brandon Lee. I'm the Director General of this initiative. A quick question. How many of you have heard of this initiative? Just have heard of Grants and Contributions Transformation. Okay, almost half. And how many of you can say that you're comfortable with what's happening and you're comfortable enough to come up here and join me on stage? Okay. And how many of you have never heard of this initiative yet? Okay, under 10%. Very good. Thank you very much. So if we can go to slide 2, maybe. Why are we doing this? Maybe another show of hands. How many of you have been through a reform from global affairs, looking to reform some piece of grants and contributions management? How many of you have been through this? Okay, maybe 10%. So why we are doing this is, if I can be very direct, it's the way we manage grants and contributions globally is no longer fit for purpose. So we must adapt we must be able to respond to global needs today. We need to be much faster. We need to be much more efficient. And on that, we have to have a collaborative approach. So the way we've designed this and the way we're going about it is actually partners know more about this initiative than global affairs colleagues, because we started by speaking to partners because we're co-designing it. Let's be honest, it's you and the partners that are delivering the $6 billion that comes from global affairs and not global affairs ourselves. So we really have to have a co-design approach. So that's what we've started with. And in fact, if we look at the total scale, Chris mentioned it, it's 6 billion, 1,600 to 2,000 projects a year, with almost 700 partners a year that we collaborate with. So it's a pretty big scale. What's also important, and I think some of you are also aware, is that this is all grants and contributions at Global Affairs. So just not international assistance, peace and security, counterterrorism, even our economic trade programming, Canada Fund for Local Initiatives. So this is a mission program at our embassies around the world. So if we can go to the next slide, please, slide 3. Where we're looking, we are looking at this holistically. So about 10% of you have put up your hand for some kind of grants and contributions transformation before. We are working from first principles, beginning to end, of how we manage all grants and contributions. So this is where it's a re-envisioning. It's not just a system that we're building. The end product will be a new system, but we have to begin with process re-engineering, all the business processes, who does what, roles and responsibilities, our policy framework, and then we're going to build a new system to manage 6 billion and 2,000 projects a year. So it's a large initiative. Some of you have been involved in reforming pieces of it, but if I can say, it's harder to reform pieces than the whole thing. So if we think about renovating your house, if maybe you need a new hot water tank, it's nice to renovate one piece. But if your pipes are rusting out, if your windows are old, changing one piece of a system doesn't help the whole thing. If we make RFIs or contract negotiations faster, financial management, risk management, we have to look at every piece because the inefficiency is coming from the whole system, if I can say. So what we're looking at is one size does not fit all anymore. And largely, partners, small, medium, and large, Global Affairs has managed as a one-size-fits-all. So what does that mean? It means we're building relationships. Maybe the longer a partner has had a track record, there's more of a relationship that Global Affairs can build upon. So we're looking at a tiered framework for how we work with partners. We're looking at streamlining document submissions. We're looking at what does it mean to truly embody localization, decolonization efforts. Better project monitoring. How can we truly leverage partners and Global Affairs when we look at project monitoring? How can we communicate better? How can we communicate more timely and more transparently? And then, of course, I think this is an interesting one for those of you that manage projects. How can we give more clarity on available funding, on decision-making on funding? How can we have better communication there? And then overall, I think this is one of the hardest things to address, but how can we focus on results and not outputs, but true results in a collaborative fashion with partners? So if we can go to the next slide, please, slide 4. So everything I've just gone through What are the benefits of this initiative? Of course, it's exactly the results of what I mentioned. We are targeting simpler applications, faster approvals, better access for more diverse partners and more localized partners, seamless teamwork across programs. How many of you have worked with different branches within global affairs with completely different processes, systems, expectations? And again, evidence-based investments and evidence-based results conversations, much reduced administrative burdens, and comprehensive reporting. So, next slide, slide 5. I hope this is creating a lot of questions, because our purpose of being here is to hear what's important to you and what is a priority to you. I've just gone through a huge list that we are tackling all of the above, but we need to hear from you your priorities, actually. When we look at partners, I had mentioned this co-creation idea, and we must co-design and co-create. So we've created our entire team structure, our processes around co-creation. I won't unpack that unless you're really curious to hear. What will you see? So next slide, please, on slide 6. So the way we're designing this is using an agile framework, a product style, a product management framework. So what that means is one word. It means it's iterative. So we are not what's called waterfall. We don't listen to what you say and say thank you and come back 3 years later and say here's the system. We have developers and teams every 2 weeks. We'll be shipping a new product, meaning we'll invite certain partners, certain groups, certain users in. Every 2 weeks, we'll show, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? What do you think of this? And we iterate based on needs. So the first version, actually, most people will be disappointed because it's 70% their version. But as we iterate, we get closer and closer to what we think is the perfect system. So in this way, the best way to stay in contact with us, we're trying to be as transparent and interactive as possible. So the Mentimeter today will be one form of that. But we have 3 times a year open to anybody across Canada and globally. We have sessions where we have partner forums where we give full updates, where we are, what our challenges are, and what we're working on. So I think I invite you to come to those where, again, we receive your feedback there. Maybe I'll leave it there because I want to pass. Anne has a lot of the meaty, juicy stuff that I think you want to hear about. So I'll pass it on to Anne, and let's go to slide 7.
Merci, Brendan. Bonjour tout le monde. Bon après-midi. Bien contente d'être avec vous. So I don't know if it's going to be meaty and juicy, but I thought I would speak maybe to the what we're doing from a transformation of the business process perspective, which is actually the part that underlies the system, but also the part where we actually interact with partners through financial instruments and other aspects of programming. So I can't see the screen, but I believe you should see 6 colored squares that actually represent the proposed partnership principles that we developed through a very dynamic collaborative process around a hackathon last June. Some of you might have participated. There was over 300 partner representatives who took part. There was a lively discussion in 2 in-person sessions, as well as over the course of a week through an online collaboration tool. And the 6 principles that are there are what people came up with as what we hope would be our guiding principles for the transformation of the system, not only as an information system, but really like in a systemic sense. And so some of these Brendan already alluded to. Valuing the diversity of partners is something that's front and center. Building trust, working towards a shared agenda, and then being much more open to living with risk, I guess, and being consequent about this in the way that we actually approach what we request from partners, what we request as reporting, and what we put forward as well as requirements. And so those are, we think, principles that will help move the dial and help us achieve the goals of efficiency, effectiveness, and trust. So that's the guiding principles. And then what did we also discuss in the hackathon are very concrete elements relative to how we go about the proposal process, what kind of administrative requirements we have, the due diligence process, as well as Brandon mentioned, the issue of locally led development. And so that gave rise to a number of proposals for modifications we could make. We call them solutions, things that would enable us collectively to achieve results and impact in a way that would be much more nimble, that would be faster in terms of processing time, but that would also allow to take into account the dynamic environment in which we evolve. So if we're on the next slide, we've schematized sort of the way that we go about at the moment doing this business process transformation. So ideas from the hackathon, but also other sources. We're, of course, fully cognizant of the several years of engagement between GAC and the various partner groups in terms of giving us ideas about what's not working, what we could do better, or what you would like to see. And then we take those and we select some, and we have put in place something that we call the Fail Smart Lab. And so the Fail Smart Lab actually speaks to the sixth principle that was on the previous slide that I did not mention, but that's about not being afraid of sometimes getting it wrong, obviously in a way that's controlled or that's rational. We, of course, don't want to set ourselves up or anybody up for failure, but we do want to embrace the fact that with uncertainty and with being bold and trying to do things differently, there might be times when we're not going to succeed, at least not the first time. And so being intentional about that, ensuring that we actually have a robust system to measure, to follow what we're doing. So it's really a test environment. And this Fail Smart Lab is another of the co-design mechanisms that we've put in place, because we're actually doing this with partners on real projects in real time. And I know some of the organizations represented in this room have been participating in some of the conversations around those. So there's various cohorts. So the lab usually works with a series of projects around a particular portfolio to look at, are there ways we could do things differently, and including in terms of sharing and learning and the dynamics of collaboration and learning and emulation, if I might say, between partners. So an example is the youth internship programs. It was one of the first Fail Smart sort of pilots that we launched. And in that experience, that the agreement signatures came for 6 out of the 7 within 4 months of the project approval. So this is one of the metrics, obviously, that we're watching, and partners have been quite happy with that, and they're also now looking at different other elements of collaboration. So I don't know if you're now on the examples, but if we go back to the previous slide, the idea is that from these, we are going to derive some of the new business rules and processes. And these, in turn, will be implemented in our new IT system, which is going to be, the intent is, a fully integrated relationship management system with a portal for users, so partners, and a portal internal for the different people, different roles that actually play a part in the process regarding launching a call, assessing proposals, putting in place an instrument, and then along the implementation of and the whole life of the project, the monitoring, the various reporting, up until the final reporting and closing of the project. And so that's the path that, or the mechanics, if you will, behind the transformation. We call this, tentatively call at least this new system Impleo, which is why you see that on the slide. So if we go to the last slide that I have actually for this brief presentation of what we're doing on the business process side, those are the Fail Smart Lab pilots. So there's currently 5 pilots. So I mentioned the IIP project. We also have a series of projects in the paid unpaid care work field. We're doing a lean exercise for those of you who are familiar with this methodology on a call for proposals. There's nothing public yet, but we're hoping to have some modest changes to some of the calls coming up in terms of facilitating the process, both for partners and for the way the flow is actually managed internally. Obviously, a lot of these things will not be visible. I mean, we're reviewing due diligence, workflow within the review process, for example, or the assessment process. We hope it will be visible to partners through the result, which will be easier process and faster reaction. And yeah, so that's essentially, that's what this is. The various solutions that are being tested are at different stages in the life of the project. At this stage, they're mostly focused, obviously, on the upfront, because that's where we're at since we launched this in the fall. And we're going to be working over the coming months to define parameters for a second wave of pilots to continue to inform our work.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Anne. Thank you, Brandon. Right on time and much appreciated. So I'm going to stand so I can move to the front so I can see the screen. My name is David LeBlanc. I am the Deputy Director for Engagement and Communications for this initiative. This is super cool for me for a couple of reasons. One, it's been a hot minute since I've been back on campus here at Carleton. I did my undergrad about 50 meters that way at the School of Communications and Journalism. I don't know if that's even still what it is in the St. Patrick building. I liked it so much, I came back to do my master's at the Institute of Political Economy, which was also pretty awesome. And I'm not supposed to tell a Nipsey joke here because my wife told me not to, and she's wicked smart, so I'm going to ignore that. This is really also cool because, as I said, I helped start an NGO in northern Thailand, working in food security and human rights issues with displaced Burmese folks. I was originally funding through GAC and had to navigate the red tape and administrative burden at the time to get money. So when this opportunity came up to transform that system, it was too tempting not to take, because how this is going to break down, we're going to break this into 3 separate sessions. Sorry. The first one is we really want to hear those questions. We just heard a lot of interesting information from Anne and Brandon. I'm sure that triggered some questions in your heads. We're going to leverage Menti to do that. In fact, we're going to leverage Menti a whole lot today. So for those of you that are familiar, it's a super easy app. You can take out your phones, click that QR code. For those that are online via Zoom, I think we're dropping the link in the chat, so you can join us that way as well. We'll still go old school. If folks have questions that they just want to throw up their hand and ask, please feel free to do so. A few notes about Menti. It is in English, mais par contre, soyez à l'aise de poser les questions dans la langue officielle de votre choix. As well as, for those that haven't used Menti before, it's a pretty cool system where you're going to see questions. As you folks start asking those questions, you're going to see it start to populate in the app. You can upvote questions that you see there. So you might be thinking of the same question as some of your friends, colleagues here in the room. Don't have to ask the question twice, just throw a thumbs up on it and it'll get bumped up to the top. So yeah, without further ado, I think we're gonna I'm gonna check the app. We'll open up the app here and get to the first question, which if I'm not, here we go. So I'll throw this one, I think, to Brandon. Brandon, what are the main challenges or risks that the initiative faces, and how will you address them?
Excellent question. The biggest risk and the biggest challenge for us, I would say, is culture change. Just by a show of hands, well, actually, I won't. You're all busy typing, so I won't distract you. But, you know, my question just for you to reflect on is, how progressive and open to change in your career so far have you seen the sector? Have you seen the organizations? Are they open and flexible and adaptable, or maybe not so much? And the exact same thing in your careers engaging with global affairs. I can say that at Global Affairs, we have over 1,000 officers that manage grants and contributions. And those 1,000 have been managing them the way they've been trained until now. So to get 1,000 officers who, some, I'm sure you'll know there's a spectrum, but some are very risk averse, some are very innovative. But we have to get all of them to rethink the function of a project team lead or a project officer or a project admin is going to change completely. So that kind of change management is probably the biggest risk that we have, trying to manage that. I think we have, just pulling a few of you into a room, we can build a new process. How do you get thousands and hundreds of organizations following the new process? I think it's the change management. I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Brandon. And I think the next question we have is, will the new grants and contributions process and systems result in improved processing times for both calls for proposals and unsolicited submissions?
So the answer is yes and yes. But what we're looking at, because we're going from first principles, is can we structure the entire thing in a more intelligent way as well? Is ad hoc, open 24/7 all the time? Does that make sense or not? And so we're having some very fundamental questions around this. But that is, as Anne said, faster, more efficient is a fundamental principle of this transformation.
Thank you very much, Brandon. And it's funny to see the thumbs go because the questions are changing before my eyes. All right. Will this change benefit international development partners who have never received GAC funding? Yeah, this is a common question we've heard before. If so, how? If not, why not?
There's a hope that it will, in the sense that there's one of the 6 principles that we're putting forward as forming the basis of the new approach is really to acknowledge the variety and the diversity of partners. And certainly with the challenges that we live in the world, there's probably room for new approaches, new ideas, and so we do hope that this will facilitate or maybe make it more interesting for non-traditional partners to want to work with us.
Well, merci, Anne. All right, and this one, is related to environment scans for the project. How have you looked at how other financial partners, donors, have tried to make systematic changes? Do you consider any of them models for Canada?
That's a great question. One commonality I can say is that most governments, most donor countries, and most large foundations are all rethinking how they manage grants and contributions. I would say that in those conversations, our scope and ambition is probably leading generally the pack. Having said which, as I've been unpacking and digging deeper, it's apples to oranges to pears. Because some countries may be faster, but they may outsource everything. Some countries have lighter processes, but the risk is actually sits on the partner much more than a shared risk. So it depends on the structures, the frameworks, and so it's really apples to oranges, but we're learning from everybody. And if I may request, if you have seen a country or a project or a partner that really would benefit Canada, send it in. We are open. Now is your time to educate us. We're here for that. Anything else to add?
Yeah. Actually, I also want to say we tend to look outside because this is an internationally focused group, but in fact, throughout the Government of Canada, there's a ongoing large effort to modernize and to simplify grants and contributions. And so we're also talking with our colleagues in other departments, learning from them. There's even within the department the fact that we're also looking beyond international assistance. There's actually very interesting practices in some of the other streams. So this is actually exactly as Brandon said, like that's the idea. What are the best practices? What are the things that we can get inspiration from and adopt or adapt? And a question I like to ask when I meet with partners is actually like, what is the most audacious thing we could do? We are interested to know, and you know, we always say, see how far we get. I mean, this is a project that's going to take many years. As Brendan said, the idea is not to cook it now. It's to actually remain nimble and build and start living that culture of continuous improvement and adaptation that's in sync with the world that we're in.
Maybe a hot pursuit. A hot pursuit on that. Things that we've learned. For example, during COVID, we saw that there are ways to get money out the door faster. Humanitarian aid, we know, is on a different time scale. We're learning, as Anne said, from our peace and security, counterterrorism efforts. We know that there are ways to program in a more efficient, effective way, in a more partnership-based way with partners.
Thank you, Brandon. Okay, next question we have is, one observation we often hear from both the department and partners is how long it takes from concept note to proposal to approval. Do you have new timelines in mind?
We haven't set clear targets yet, and I think it's going to depend, frankly, but there is now a 2-month response time that's mandated. That's a public commitment that the minister has made for unsolicited proposal concept note reactions. So as a starting point, we're hoping that this can be extended to other processes. And then in terms of, for example, calls for proposals, I guess, you know, a 30% to 50% reduction in processing time is kind of what we're trying to test. Stay tuned.
Fantastic, thank you, Anne. And I believe the next question is related to localization. Could you expand on GAC's approach to localization?
That's a great question. So I'll begin. But similar to co-designing with partners from the start, we are reviewing every process with a view to localization and decolonization, in fact. But localization allowing global partners access. So how do we do this? Multi-language, cloud-based, light proposals. Do we have to have such heavy proposals at the very beginning, day one, or can we be more incremental and ask for more information as we go forward? So every process that we are reviewing, we have a view of localization involved. We have a view of how do we make sure that we are asking what our local partners on the ground need. Is there a way to co-design even? You know, we're asking all the questions from the beginning so that we can truly be in this space. And one thing I can share is that you can imagine this is a huge culture change for global affairs. And so even our internal conversations, sometimes it's 3 steps forward, 4 steps back, because this is not the way global affairs works. And so how can we really keep partners from day one in mind? So that's where we are. Canada, we don't have an official localization policy. We have statements and directions we've made, but we're actually working in parallel with our policy teams to help craft and define what Canada's localization policy is. So that's how first principles, that's how much we're working from first principles on this. Anything to add on that, Anne?
I guess I just want to say, obviously, our initiative is not about legislation. So we're very much focused on the practicalities and what are the key elements in terms of grants and contribution processes that are important to look at, I guess, from a locally led development perspective. And we're also participating along with other donors into an OECD DAC peer learning exercise to see what are some of the best practices. And so we're hoping to get inspiration from that for next steps as well.
Thank you again, and Brandon on that. And I think just time-wise, I feel like we have about time for 2 more questions. So the next one I have here is, and perhaps related to the previous topic, will there be specific consideration for micro or small enterprises in allowing for much smaller projects and keeping processes simple and clear?
That's a great question. On that, if I can be as honest as possible, I think we are mindful and considerate of micro and small projects. But when we look at speed, is global affairs the right one to lead micro and small projects? I think this is a question that we are asking because, let's be honest, the government we are still the federal government. We have regulation, legislation, we have political dimensions that the government will always have to work within. So are there ways to work faster for micro and small? As we mentioned, there's $6 billion that global affairs programs. So if we are going to so that means we write checks, 50, 80, 100 million. If we get smaller, a few million. If we start writing 50K checks, the number of projects we manage, you can imagine. So we have to really, I think this is where I would love to hear from you. I think for localization to work, we cannot give a small local partner $10 million. I think that may be setting them up for failure almost. But then how do we make that an efficient, effective process? Probably you know the answer better than me. So I'd love to hear some ideas from you. And I'll pass it to Anne.
So on making the process simple and clear, I think clear, absolutely. This is definitely something that's very much top of mind. And in fact, in the hackathon, that was also something that was communicated in several instances and ways, the importance of ensuring that, I think it's linked to transparency and being non-equivocal about what the requirements are, I guess. Simple, yes, simple doesn't mean simplistic. So when we talk about simplification, we also say it might mean different. But again, coupled with clarity of expectations and tools.
All right. Thanks again, Brendan and Anne. And I mentioned there was going to be 3 sections to this engagement portion of the day, and I've been doing this long enough to know that if we don't do this now, we're going to lose you at the end. There is a new QR code on the screen. Please do take a few seconds. It is literally a minute. It is a survey for our benefit. We are dedicated ourselves to an evidence-based approach to this transformation. Your feedback is essential to that. So if you wouldn't mind, please just take a minute to go ahead and do that. And while you are typing away on that survey, we're going to go ahead. I'll just leave that up for a few more seconds. In fact, you know what I think I'll do is, I don't think I'm able to bounce back to the next question. Here we go. So hopefully you guys got that QR code and locked in and you're answering that survey. The last question we're going to ask is, how are the invited group of partners being selected to participate in the consultations?
I'll take this one. So what I've found, well, actually, I'll answer it very directly. The way we are selecting partners is Global Affairs is inviting partners based on their availability, their size, and the projects that they're leading and managing. In any exercise like this, for us and for me, efficiency is key. And so, as you can imagine, the selection of partners is a small p political landmine of how we select partners, who we select partners, the geographic representation, the size representation. So this is not a democracy. This is a co-creation, and we're open to collaborating, but the most efficient and the easiest way forward is for Global Affairs to select. So on this, though, we're open to hearing from what partners are doing new things. Is there a partner that has found a new way to invite local partners to collaborate with? Are there new ideas? So the way I and the team select partners is crowdsourcing the ideas. We are not selecting the usual players. We are selecting those partners who have the capacity, and let's be honest, working with Global Affairs takes a lot of time, there are a lot of meetings. So the partners that have an interest, the time, but also that are pushing the boundary, trying some new things, we want to reward and invite those partners forward. So we're very open to hearing from those partners, from you, who those partners might be, and we'll follow up directly with those partners to see if they're interested. So that's how we've been working. Maybe I'll leave it there. Anne, anything to add?
Just maybe in terms of the lab, so the Fail Smart Lab and the pilots, we're really working with the programs first and foremost, and what there might be an opportunity to test in a particular context of a portfolio. And so the partners who happen to be the ones who are in that cohort then find themselves to be part of the pilots. And so that's also sort of how we've managed that for at least for the first wave.
Thank you so much. And Ann, I'll ask you to hold on to that microphone because we're moving to the final section of our session here. So this is the final QR code for the Mentimeter, and this is the fun part for us where we get to ask you folks questions. So we're trying to leverage your expertise, a lot of big brains in the room, a lot of experience. And again, in our commitment to co-creation, we'd love to hear from you. So if you could go ahead and log in right now on that Mentimeter, and you will see that we have questions coming your way. And I'm going to stay on this side so I can see the screen as they come in. Once again, you'll see the instructions. And then go ahead and continue on through. And then what we should see on screen soon is the engagement starting to pop up. All right, so our question for you is, what innovative approaches and best practices should the Grants and Contribution Transformation Initiative consider in the changing international development and humanitarian assistance context? So as you folks are typing away now, the responses will start to come up on screen and we can have a bit of an engagement on that. There'll also be an opportunity for folks in the room that aren't participating in the Menti. If you want to go ahead and provide a response, please throw up your hand and I'll come around with the mic, and we can do it that way as well. All right. So far to our question, what innovative approaches and best practices should the GCTI consider in the changing international development and humanitarian assistance context? Not quantum. Co-create full proposal after concept approved. Too costly to have full proposal not approved for small organizations. That resonates with me. Be much more open and transparent about how newer partners can get funding and join new initiatives. Absolutely. We have get development out of politics. Protect aid envelope from military and trade creep. More focus on coalitions driven by Southern NGOs with Northern partners as sub-partner. And to my colleagues on the stage, if any of these that I'm mentioning you want to elaborate on or ask for elaboration on?
Well, I just want to say, like, I ask for audacious ideas, so I'm starting to see some of them, so please keep it going.
Absolutely. We have how to better leverage Canadian knowledge, research, and expertise. Look towards universities for innovative solutions. Engaging government or other national stakeholders in reviewing goals for projects proposed in their territory. Adaptive project management, providing the necessary time, resources, and flexibility for an inception period to co-create initiatives allowing experimentation and dynamic project indicators.
Oh, so can I ask what would be dynamic project indicators? If the person is willing, obviously, to expand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so in an earlier conversation about monitoring and evaluation, we were talking about the concept of having a set of core indicators where these correspond to any priorities that global affairs may have, and then a dynamic set of indicators which change with implementation. So these reflect the priorities of the local partners, changing assumptions on the ground, making sure that the project is responding to what they see. So a more dynamic set and then a core set that responds to priorities that are already there.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. What else do we have? Be much more open and transparent about how newer partners can get funding and join new initiatives. How to better leverage Canadian knowledge, research, and expertise. Look towards universities for. Oh, we already did that one. This is a problem with me, like just bouncing all over the place. There we go. Early market engagements to let partners plan and mobilize resources. Balance large-scale projects with smaller grants for small organizations. And there's definitely a theme emerging here. Be open about available funding for different kinds of partners. Definitely seems to be an appetite to open up the lens on that a bit. Streamline reporting requirements. Yes. Promote co-financing, matching funds. Collaborate more with the multilateral development banks and explore public crowdsourcing to complement grants programs.
That crowdsourcing, anybody wants to elaborate on that? I know at least one program who explored that, but I don't know that they were able to do it. So if anybody has, no?
All right, we'll leave the crowdsourcing for later. Continue having open office hours where we can connect with questions and co-create. Apps, that resonates with me very much. Yes, absolutely. We're not hard to track down. Open invitation to the people in this room to reach out to me as your vector into global affairs. 100%, and we can connect after. I think we had our my email. Anyways, we'll connect. We'll hook it up. Let's move on to the next question, please, just to make sure that we can get all these in. In your opinion, what key factors would ensure the success of the Grants and Contribution Transformation Initiative system innovation? In your opinion, what key factors would ensure the success of the GCTI system innovation? And I think, just as you're typing away there, I think we have about, 5 questions, I think? Yeah. So this is the second of 5. And our first responses are starting to come in. All right, so in your opinion, what key factors would ensure the success of the GCTI system innovation? Engage with local partners in regions we work in to determine their greatest needs and largest barriers. Absolutely. Intuitive digital mobile platforms with great fonts, colors, accessibility, auto-saving. Very practical. Transparency and funding envelopes. Transparency coming up a couple times. A proactive communication and capacity building strategy for current and potential partners.
Yep. So,
Strate-
sorry. On capacity building, actually, this is a very interesting discussion, obviously. Something that's been going on as well for small Canadian partners for a number of years. And one of the things that we're discussing, actually, is looking at it in terms of sustainability measures. As often that is the consequence of lower capacity, is an impact on the ability of the results to be sustained. So some of the mind shifts as well, I think, are happening there as well.
Thank you, Anne. And some common threads emerging. Another suggestion to be flexible and including engaging local partners, strategic partners for longevity. Another thread's emerging here about persistent communication with partners. I see ensuring ongoing updates, transparency and communication, and a clear timeline. Absolutely. Yeah, again, more on easier reporting, faster approval. So a general pleas for efficiency, it seems. Co-creating of full proposals so that approved concept notes are virtually guaranteed funding.
There's actually limits to co-creation under the terms and conditions from Treasury Board, just to put that out there. So, but you know, the notion of having involved parties and various actors discussing what might be needed, how it might happen, what they might contribute, definitely is something that I think is of interest.
Thank you, Anne. We have expanding accessibility to grants, scaling up and down application requirements based on size experience of the organization. We have be open about what elements of a contribution agreement are or are not negotiable. So again, transparency, a huge thing. Learn from pandemic times when it was necessary to adapt projects quickly, which included CA amendments. Absolutely.
So some of these measures have actually been implemented, like as a matter of course, in terms of low cost or low complexity amendments, just so you know that there is some movement. But they're all great ideas. I mean, I'm just...
Thank you so much. And then maybe just one, more communication across GAC is teams on projects. Okay. Let's go on to the next one then. And once again, if anyone is a non-mentee that wants to throw up their hand to make a contribution to any of these questions, please do so. Absolutely.
Are these being moderated and filtered?
The questions?
Yeah.
There's a light moderation going on, yes.
Okay.
You have one that you go
I did. I put it in 2 times, and it's not coming up. So my question has to do with protecting the aid envelope from creep. Well, you had that one there, but you didn't read it out. We do have an International Assistance Accountability Act, which protects international assistance and funding to be used for poverty reduction and human rights. It's a really good tool, and it can help push back expectations from political, military, and trade. So I'm just curious. You can address that at any point or ignore, but it's been filtered out twice, I think.
It was actually read earlier.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, I distinctly heard it. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, I mean, the ODAAA stands, absolutely. Not as part of what we're working on. It's absolutely used. I mean, the filters that are in the ODAAA are being applied in the assessment of investments. Absolutely.
Thank you. And great question. And like we're trying not to filter questions out. It's just a matter of trying to streamline the process. So absolutely. And if throw up your hand if you do have other questions. What tools and technologies could support data management of international development projects? And already people, yeah, that question was up for a second, so people are already starting to respond. So what tools and technologies could support data management of international development projects? So right off the bat, we have common online reporting coming up. AI chatbot for reporting.
So what does that mean? I'm interested. Does that mean that partners actually ask AI to report for them? And on the basis of what? Or is it something else?
I can elaborate on that, and it was a question I had, and also crowdsourced by someone who's watching and texted the question to me as well. Basically, you can now you can train different AI tools to generate certain kinds of responses, depending on the framework you're working within, right? So you can set parameters around it, and so I've heard this a few different times. The suggestion being that if there are common elements to reporting that you're completing that are very repetitive, or you're providing the same information over and over again, is there a way that we could integrate some of that into reporting processes?
So, I mean, first thing I'm going to say, the point of trying to build an integrated system is to avoid having to enter the same information in multiple locations and avoid cut and pasting, which is, again, a task that we're all spending way too much time on. And then in terms of AI, as you describe, you can do many things with it. So I guess it's a question that you were asking in terms of how do we see that, or? There are many things that are possible. I mean, I think the issue there is one of choice. It has to be used judiciously. The Government of Canada, TBS, released guidelines on the use of AI this morning, generative AI in particular, because, I mean, algorithms and, anyways, fancy data, what is it called? Scraping, or, there's a word for it. It's not coming, scrubbing, whatever, like, there are some things that we've tried in terms of aggregating information over a large amount of documents. It has a cost, so we have to choose judiciously what we would use it for and how, obviously, taking into account all of the risks and the ethical components, which are hotly debated, obviously, especially in the type of data that we handle.
Thank you, Anne. Yeah, AI, definitely a hot topic. It's come up a few times here, a common theme for sure. I see Microsoft 365, which is interesting. Translation, just go back down a little bit. There was one I wanted to address. Translation tools to help partners who do not speak English, French. This one resonates with me deeply. The executive director of the NGO I was a part of spoke English as a third language. Imagine trying to navigate a global affair, well, at the time, CETA paperwork to get funding. So that's a great suggestion. Unified tools and reporting, as well as interpretation of the reporting. We are seeing reporting being interpreted differently from each desk. Max QDA, I don't know what that is. Anyone want to elaborate on that one?
It's a qualitative analysis data platform, right?
The person who needs to know what it is knows what it is, so that's awesome. Tools and technologies that are practical and adaptable to local contexts, easy to use and manage. And I think this is part of this common thread that's emerging, that if we're being meaningful and intentional with localization, it is not just about policy, it is about the tools that we're adapting. I would squarely put translation tools in that to empower and give agency to the actual organizations that then aren't dependent on a guy from Canada to come and navigate the funding system on their behalf. If they could do it directly, that would be fantastic. So a great suggestion as well. Monitoring and evaluation platform accessible by stakeholders, again, and developing countries' entities. Shares a lesson learned to better address global challenges. Oh, here we have a fail-smart lab where, in the interest of co-creation, a database be co-created using open source approaches for a handful of projects. Interesting.
You want to speak to open source?
Brandon?
Sure, sure. So I really love these ideas. Part of exactly what we're trying to leverage with our machine learning and is to leverage open source. If we are, as mentioned at the beginning, if we are trying to focus on results, do we really need to ask the small local partner to try and measure impact on health, impact on education, or are there think tanks, governments that we know, some are trustable, some are less trustable, but can we use open source data that's available as a chapeau to inform some of the results if we're truly looking at results impact of our efforts? So that's one. And if I can just riff a little bit on the language. One thing about decolonization, in the Western world, we put a very high emphasis on the written word. Like if you see a spelling error in a document, it's our credibility of that writer or that whoever wrote it goes down right away. But if we are to become accessible and use auto-translation, I think why not let our Filipino colleague write in Tagalog, it'll automatically translate to English and French. Even if it's not perfect, we'll get the gist of it. We'll understand what that translation is. So I think this is also part of rebalancing. Again, it's a culture change. Having an auto-translated document, reading from that, this is, thousands of officers at Global Affairs. We have to do a big culture change. But that's part of, again, what we're looking at. I've gotten in trouble because I have lots of ideas, as all of you, but if I share too much, sometimes we get on the hook for it. So I love hearing these ideas.
So, but whomever spoke to a FailSmart Lab idea on results database, I'd be interested to have an offline conversation on that specifically, or if you want to elaborate.
So yeah, that was me. Nice to meet you. And this is great. Thank you for doing it. And we can follow up afterwards. But I just wanted to highlight that this idea came for me because here's a shout out to Alinea, one of the sponsors of this event, because Alinea has hired our small firm to work in Côte d'Ivoire, where they are asking themselves the same questions around databases and managing information about all the different types of projects that countries like Canada and all their partners implement in Côte d'Ivoire, and how they can't access that information. They don't know who's doing what and who's doing it where. So the same types of questions are being asked from the other perspective. And so doing a FailSmart Lab like this, which is open source, can potentially have an impact in countries where Canada is investing resources, not only in terms of grants and contributions, but also loans and otherwise. So taking it and it aligns with localization and the rest. Sorry, I spoke for too long.
Not at all. This is exactly what it's about. Thank you. All right, we have the next question up. I think we only have 2 questions remaining. In your opinion, what are the key elements to consider to strengthen evidence-based practices in international development?
Just as a small question, right, at the end of this meeting.
That's right. In your opinion, what are the key elements to consider to strengthen evidence-based practices in international development? Just by way of information, apparently we're not filtering anything. That's one. So anything you type, we're getting. And 2, we're keeping this. So in the sense that if I'm not speaking it out or calling it out, don't worry, it's all going into the tank. And we're going to be leveraging this very valuable feedback. So huge thanks again. All right, some answers coming back in. We have inclusion and meaningful participation of local stakeholders. That might end up being the slogan of this session. Resources for data collection and monitoring. Transparent and open access to successes and failures. Streamlined processes and capacity building, another very common theme that we've heard throughout. And here's, yeah, well-resourced monitoring and evaluation. Too often, evaluation is an afterthought. Budgets are too small or are not done at all.
So lots on monitoring, evaluation, successes and failures. How do people feel about, I mean, because it goes both ways, right? We can collect information, but how about publishing a lot of that information? Is that something people are ready for?
I heard a yes. Understand that evidence only gets you so far. Focus on ongoing dialogue, sensing, and adaptation. Creating robust benchmarks for qualitative outcomes and match them equally with qualitative outputs. Long-term funding agreements. Lock the good stuff in now before, before the cons cut Canada's best work. Make use of existing thought leaders. IDRC comes to mind. Incorporate sectoral and contextual knowledge, including local knowledge. Human-centered approaches. Baseline, mid, end line with data sets big enough for peer-reviewed research projects. Baseline, mid, end line with data sets big enough for, it's just twice.
So
Yeah.
again, that's very interesting. So I don't know if there's anybody here who's working on projects which would have that kind of data sets. I know there are a few, but not always.
And another comment, sufficient project resources in M&E is needed. Flexible MEL that is ongoing, collaborative, and can be co-created with the project partners. It may need to be created after the project application. Oh, interesting one. Make use of scholarly literature and emerging theories, especially on decolonizing development. Use GAC funding to expand the Canadian professional community, modes to engage with more people, including engaging specifically SMEs. Cool, lots of great suggestions.
So SMEs here meaning small and medium enterprises, right? Not subject matter experts. Or both.
Perfect. All right. I think we'll go ahead to the last engagement question. Make sure we have enough time. We do.
Is that a question?
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So to that, some ideas that I heard in the last day and a half include lengthening the duration of the inception period. So some donors will give a year for people to figure out what the context is, collect the data, how they're going to collect the data, engage the partners. And then the resourcing of that. I've worked with some international donors, frankly, also private sector partners who have lots of money for this piece, you know, getting all that information. They've got tons of money to invest in that. And I think, I could be wrong, and I'm not speaking, I'm just a consultant, so I don't think some of our Canadian partners have the same coffers available to get that rich data. And then the last but not least, well, remembering to collect sex disaggregated data or data that reflects the full context of the human population we're working with and we're impacting. But then, of course, the digital context. So I was at a technology and rights conference and learned that the International Red Cross is developing blockchain for the biometric data that's being collected in humanitarian context. So haven't heard that being discussed, but biometric data is being collected as a requirement to receive bags of rice and flour and so on. So that's also, I don't know, the humanitarian sector is important for us. That's an important piece, and there are very serious human rights issues and also some innovation. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
And thank you so much. All right, this will be our last question as we're running out of time. Once transformation is complete, what would make you consider the GCTI a success? Big question.
All our bonuses ride on this question, so please, please answer it honestly.
All right. Some of the initial answers coming in. Better funded and supported program design. More impactful projects with funding from Canada. Not what ArriveCan did. I think that's ArriveCan. Greater measurable impact. We'll just scroll back down just so I can get that top one. That it survives changes in government and is pointed to international by OECD peers and countries where Canadian money is programmed as a model. Dramatically shortened timelines for project selection and approval. Streamlined and consistent reporting processes, guidelines, and active training. Positive results and better timelines. Definitely the common theme of efficiency, faster timelines. More organizations able to access funding, another common theme we've heard. We hit the SDGs. No ensuring Canadian partners are trained on this system, and uptake it is important. Easier applications for funding, faster approvals, more transparent communications, another theme. More opportunities for diverse Canadian organizations getting funding for their projects. Absolutely.
Maybe if I can say that there are some difficult issues, you know, obviously. Like, for example, there's a natural tension. We spoke about monitoring, more transparency on lessons learned, success. But in a competitive environment, are we really going to get the truth on what didn't work? Are we really, you know, at another session, someone said, every performance report is, it's sunny and perfect all the time, nothing is going wrong, we couldn't do better. But are we really going to, how do we crack that challenge of true lessons learned in a competitive funding environment? You know, that's a natural tension. Another one, as we know, if you've been following the news, budget cuts, less money available. So some of these comments, more money for upfront, more money for monitoring evaluation. Maybe a quick show of hands, should we spend more money and do less projects? If the envelope is the envelope, and we're talking about more money, more investment, more time, that means within the same envelope, we're doing less projects, but putting more money against fewer projects, which means fewer partners are being funded, fewer. So you know, these are some of the, if we're going to get where the rubber meets the road, actually, some of your recommendations, the natural outcome means less projects and more investment, is what I'm hearing. You know, there is unfortunately no money tree in Canada that we've found yet, but this is the result of some of these recommendations.
Any thoughts on Brandon's query? Depth versus width? No? Oh, no? Okay. I think we're running out of time, so just quickly through these. Easier applications for funding, faster approval. Yes, I read that one. More organizations can access to the system, including funding. Definitely hearing a lot of the same thing. Success in creating the necessary culture change at GAC. Yes. And as this is part of a broader transformation at Global Affairs, correct? Feedback on unsuccessful concept notes and proposals is actionable and informative. A meaningful increase in implementing decolonized, localized approaches and perspectives. Canada is on its way. So again, bearing in mind it's once the transformation is complete, what would make you consider it a success? Canada is on its way to becoming a sought-after development partner. I think that's huge.
Absolutely. That's the ultimate goal, actually, making Canadian dollars sexy again globally.
I think that concludes our session. No. But yeah, in all seriousness, we are actually out of time. So a huge thank you to you folks for this extremely valuable feedback. I mean, I'm not kidding, everything that you guys put in, we're taking to heart here. As Brandon said, and we're trying to be audacious. You know, certainly in this stage, nothing is off the table. I can't remember unless prevented by legislation or something along those lines. So super excited to be a part of this audacious creation activity. We're throwing back the survey up just in case people didn't get a chance to answer it. But a huge thank you, and I think I'm throwing it back to Chris.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you, Brandon and Anne, as well, for being so open to sharing with us and then getting feedback from us. I think one of the things that has really struck me in this session and talking with you first has been not only just your openness to come talk with us, but your desire to get input and feedback. And that's usually quite rare in a lot of these things. You know, it's like, well, we want to hear feedback, but it's very limited, or we can't really do much on it. But you have very much sought that out, and that's been fantastic. And I've also, I think we've been able to get a glimpse of some of the complexities that you have to work. Like you're saying, a full culture change. We're dealing with culture change in Canada, around the world as well, where things that we've taken for granted that everybody values and appreciates us working towards, you know, there's competing priorities now, and they're like, well, we like that, but we have less money to go around, so it's harder to get support. So we know this is going to be a challenging process for you in the next little while, but it's reassuring to me, and I'm sure to all of us, to know that we have people that are working on it on the ground that are very committed to this and are seeking input and getting all of that guidance from everybody and wanting to work with us. So I encourage you to continue connecting with us as well, so it continues to be a two-way street. As you said, David, one of the good things with this Menti system is that there were a lot of questions raised that there wasn't time for answering, but then you're getting the ideas of the suggestions from people. You can take all that and incorporate it. So that's great. I'm just going to finish with one final question. This is a group that's very passionate about this field and wants to see global affairs achieve those objectives that we talked about. You mentioned the partnership forums that come up so people can be part of that. Is there any other way, if someone has an idea, maybe they want to flesh it out a bit more, how can they continue to engage with you and give you that input?
Excellent, thank you. So definitely the partner forums are similar to this, two-way, where we actually will come with very pointed questions to get your responses and priorities. But David is your on-ramp to this initiative. You know, so I don't know how many cards you've printed, or if we're very electronically mindful, we'll share the email. But I think we are really, you know, if you can take away one thing, without your input, we cannot co-design and co-create. Your priorities, what you've given us, we are going to now take back, analyze, and reprioritize what we work on first. So that's how important your feedback is to us. So please engage David. You know, I heard some comments around certain partners that are doing great things, policy frameworks. If you've seen great localization policies, please send them in. We are reading all of them. We're analyzing all of them. It's truly, you know, I think the days that the federal government thinks that we can do everything ourselves are over. Of course, we need to partner. And our partners probably who are on the ground know better than global affairs. So we really need to collaborate. So we're 100% open and receptive.
Perfect, thank you. I'm sure we will. Oh, yeah, Kendra.
As part of this, there's a partnership advisory group, and CAIDP has a seat on that advisory group. So CAIDP can act as a conduit as well. There's multiple ways, and the opposite of that is CAIDP will report back to its members what, you know, any updates or where they're looking for feedback. So keep that in mind going forward. And that I happen to be that representative, so I'm Kendra Toby. I'm on the CAIDP board, so yeah.
And it's interesting that we're just about to have our strategic planning session after, so as we're looking as an organization about what role that we can play, like this is exactly what we exist for, to bring people together that are working in the various sectors of international development, working with global affairs, being that conduit both ways for that discussion so that we strengthen Canadian international assistance and we improve programming and lessons learned sharing. So, okay, I want to thank you very much. Please join me in thanking Brandon, Anne, and David. And thank you to all of you for your participation.